Good morning, class. Welcome to Political Science 200. Today we will be discussing economic policy. So, hope you guys are doing well and looking forward to our lecture today. So, let's start by discussing fiscal policy. Now, in a minute, we're going to discuss monetary policy, which is different from fiscal policy. So let's start with fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is government policy that attempts to manage the economy by controlling taxing and spending. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's fiscal policy. Politicians, the president, the Congress, they tried to come to an agreement on fiscal policy, right? So go back to 2008, before we use more current examples. Go back to 2008, the economy was collapsing.
Yeah.
Because large financial institutions were going under, right?
Yep.
Then Obama won the election and he became president in January of 2009, right?
Yes, he did.
He did. He very much so did. How was the economy doing when he took office in 2009?
Not good.
Not good, right? A lot of people were getting foreclosed on. They were.
Yeah, and you could cut through their houses to get places.
Yeah, you could. A lot of people on our block, remember? We went down our block because we moved into our home in 2005. A lot of other people were buying homes at the same time, and they were buying way bigger houses than they could really afford because they were getting really low interest rate loans. And again, we don't want to spend too much time on that. The point is, the economy was doing horribly when Obama took office in 2009. So what did he propose? A stimulus package, a spending package to get the economy going, or fiscal restraint?
Fiscal restraint.
No.
I had a 1 in 3 shot.
1 in 3? Yeah, two choices.
No, you gave me 3.
Okay. Anyway.
Whatever.
He recommended a stimulus package to get the economy going, right? And he said we're looking for shovel-ready projects, things like infrastructure, right?
Buildings?
Buildings, yeah. But the classic is infrastructure, like roads and bridges.
Boy.
Right, widening roads, widening bridges, that type of thing. And shovel ready to go. Look at all the money that was just spent widening the bridge over I-65.
Yeah, it took them long enough.
Yep, it did. It took them a long time. Did that put a lot of people to work?
Yes, it did.
Yes.
Were they working hard? Don't know.
Were they working hard? Don't know. But the thing is, put a lot of people to work. They got money. So say I'm a construction worker. Do I now go out and buy a even nicer truck?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, you do.
New Ford F-150.
Yeah, new Ford F-150, exactly. That gets the economy going. Now, the car dealerships are doing well, and people are buying cars, so the insurance companies need to insure the cars. Gas stations are selling more. And the economy gets booming again, right? So, now, in our current situation, with the coronavirus, you know, it's a little different because the federal government's giving people money, right?
Yeah.
Giving people money directly, so that they can cover expenses, because they've been out of work and they haven't been getting paychecks and things like that. So it's a little different, but classic fiscal policy is when you spend money to get the economy going. Okay, this takes us to another concept, which is laissez-faire economics. And this is a theory that opposes governmental interference in economic affairs beyond what is necessary to protect life and property. So according to laissez-faire economics, should the government really promote these stimulus packages to get the economy going?
No.
No. According to laissez-faire economics, government should keep their hands off the economy.
Ron Swanson agrees with that.
Right, definitely. Ron Swanson, if you watch Parks and Rec, is a libertarian. He's very much a laissez-faire economist type, and he thinks government should stay out of things. Now, the thing is, sometimes laissez-faire economists will take things to an extreme. Whereas kind of more mainstream economists will acknowledge, even if you are for government staying out of the economy, there are situations which justify government involvement in the economy. Right? So let's talk about some of those situations. In order for markets to work efficiently in terms of resource allocation, do people have to have pretty close to full information?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely, right? Do you think that labeling laws on food are justifiable?
Yes.
Yes. Why?
Because I need to know what you put in this thing that I'm eating.
You need full information, right? If I'm buying a can of whatever it is, applesauce, whatever, I need to know if it's 100% applesauce or if it has sugar added and how many calories are in it. I need to know that.
Organic or not organic.
Right. When you are purchasing a car, do you need to know what kind of mileage it gets?
Yes.
Yes. Why?
Because that factors in if you can afford to have it or not over a longer period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? It's going to cost you a lot of money in additional gas if the car gets poor mileage, right? And that's something you can't tell just by looking at it, right?
But it looks so pretty.
But it looks so pretty, right? So anyway, this, a lot of the time, again, this is underappreciated, right? Even if you're in general a limited government involvement type of person, there are times when government involvement is 100% justified. And one of those situations is so that people can have pretty close to complete information. You know, in general, the more information you have, the better. And the more accurate it is, the better. And government can pass laws to make sure that people have accurate information. Right?
Yeah.
It takes a lot of audacity to make the argument for ignorance, right? People should be making these economic decisions when they don't have enough information to make an informed decision, right?
Yeah.
In order for markets to work efficiently in terms of resource allocation, it depends on close to complete information. And the more complete information you have, the more efficiently the market works.
Logic.
Yeah, so if you're a market type, you should be all for full information, right? Okay, next. The presence of externalities can also lead to markets working inefficiently. So government is justified in preventing externalities, right? So let's say one guy grows bananas, right? And he grows them in such a way that he can make $100 an acre off bananas. I'm just making these numbers up to make things easy, right? $100 an acre to make bananas. This other guy produces bananas, and he uses this really toxic pesticide, right?
Yeah.
And it's super cheap, super cheap.
Like 69 cents a gallon.
Yeah, it's dirt cheap, right? But it causes cancer, and it can cause cancer for the workers. It can get into the air and waft downwind and give people cancer. It can get into the local water supply, go downstream and give people cancer. And none of those cases of cancer are worked into the price of his bananas. But because he uses the pesticide,
he loses less bananas.
He loses less bananas, exactly, right? And he's able to make $200 per acre because he loses less bananas to pests, right?
Yep.
But none of those cancer costs are worked into the cost of his bananas, the price of his bananas. So farmer A, no pesticide, only makes $100 an acre. Farmer B, pesticide, $200 an acre, makes $200 an acre because he has fewer bananas lost. But people downwind or downstream, or his workers, get cancer. Which one is gonna go out of business?
The guy who isn't making as much money.
That's right. He's gonna go out of business, right? Well, it is sad because can you stop putting your foot on the table? If all those costs were worked into the price of that other farmer's bananas, the one who's using the pesticides, how much would he have to charge for bananas in order to make money?
A lot, because he'd be getting a lot of lawsuits for his cancer-causing bananas.
Exactly, right? So, pollution is the classic example of a negative externality, right? In order for markets to work efficiently, all the costs and all the benefits of the transaction have to be borne by the participants in the transaction, right? If I'm downstream and I'm getting cancer, that's a cost, and it's not being borne by the participants in the transaction. It's a cost that's being borne by a third party, someone that had no say in the transaction. Make sense?
Makes sense.
So, who do we count on to protect people from toxic pesticides?
The government.
The government, exactly. And so this is a situation. Pollution is a classic example of a negative externality, and reducing pollution or factoring pollution into the price of something is a 100% justifiable government action, right? Which, if you genuinely believe in free markets, then the presence of negative externalities is something that needs to be addressed, and it justifies government involvement, even if you're a believer in free markets, even if you're a laissez-faire economist. Make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay. So, what is the point?
Every market has advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, I mean, certain conditions need to exist in order for markets to work efficiently.
Yeah.
And if those conditions aren't present, then that justifies government involvement. Make sense?
Makes sense.
Yeah, so I went over just a couple of market failures. Yeah, well, anyway. Now, Keynesian economics is an economic theory based on the principles of John Maynard Keynes, stating that government spending should increase during business slumps and be curbed during booms. Right? So, during the 1930s in the United States, during the Great Depression,
Ooh.
How was unemployment?
It was high.
Unemployment was really high, exactly, right? And so John Maynard Keynes, he was made a lord by the British, Lord Keynes.
Lord Keynes.
Yeah, exactly. He said basically in situations like this, the government should engage in massive spending, right? So you get things like Hoover Dam.
Yeah.
Yeah, which we visited. We visited Hoover Dam. It was a lot of fun. There were a lot of other dam tourists, and
you couldn't even find the damn restroom.
we couldn't find the damn restrooms.
Or the damn gift shop.
Or the damn gift shop.
Or even a damn water fountain.
I know.
You think they'd have a damn water
Yeah,
fountain?
and the damn parking was really crowded.
Yeah.
So anyway, we went to Hoover Dam, and that was started during the Great Depression, right? Was that big or small?
That was big.
Big. That was a massive government project. You had to divert the river, right? Then build this huge dam. So did that put a few or a lot of people to work?
A lot.
A lot of people to work. That was a massive government project. Has it provided a lot of electricity to this day?
Yes.
Yes, massive amounts of electricity. And so that's the thing that Keynes said government would have to do, right? So you build this project, and it's a lasting project. It's not like you're just throwing the money away, right? You're building something that is gonna be there for generations to come.
Yeah.
And we walked across the damn bridge, and
we drove there through the damn interpass.
Yeah.
On the roads made just to see that dam. Those damn roads, are those the ones we were driving across?
Yeah. And so, so that's what you do. You build Hoover Dam. And then, again, does that put people to work?
Yes.
Do they then go buy things from private establishments?
Yeah, like a new car.
Yeah. Then do private establishments start hiring?
Yes, they do.
Yes. And then once the private establishments start hiring again, the government doesn't need to keep employing people, right?
Yeah.
So Keynes said sometimes government needs to prime the pump, right? Get things going initially, and then once it's going, then it will continue to work. Do you know what the expression prime the pump comes from?
No.
Have you seen those old-fashioned...
Oil pumps?
Yeah. You need to get it going first, and then it'll start to go. Right?
Is that why some of them go really fast in the desert and others are like super slow?
Yeah, it can be. All right. Now, some conservatives... Well, actually, let me backtrack. Did we follow Keynes' ideas during the Great Depression?
Yeah, we did.
Yes, we did. Now, there's a lot of controversy over how we got out of the Great Depression, right? Liberals will say FDR is one of the greatest presidents ever. He followed the recommendations of John Maynard Keynes. We had tons of government programs designed to get people back to work, and that's what got the economy going again, right?
Yeah.
Conservatives think FDR is one of the worst presidents ever.
Oh.
Right, that it was really World War II that got us out of the Depression, because that's when we had to massively increase production, because we had to build bombers and ammunition and that type of thing.
Yeah.
And so conservatives will say FDR didn't do anything to get us out of the Great Depression. All he did was increase the power of the federal government, and it was really World War II that got us out of the Great Depression. So liberals and conservatives do not see eye to eye on FDR at all.
They don't see eye to eye on this.
Yeah, but particularly FDR. So, next thing on this. The principles of John Maynard Keynes, while they were kind of cutting edge for the 1930s,
Yeah.
Right now they are much more mainstream.
Yeah.
To the point where Richard Nixon, a Republican, said, "We're all Keynesians now." So what do you suppose he meant by that comment? We're all Keynesians now.
That's kind of the go-to policy on these things.
Yeah, exactly. It's conventional wisdom. That's what everyone believes in, right? We're all Keynesians now. Okay, the next thing I want to point out, again, just so, it's political science and introduction to political science, so you guys need to know these arguments are out there. Some particularly conservatives will say it's really easy to increase government spending. It's not so easy to restrict it, right? Meaning it's really easy to increase government spending. If we don't have the money on hand, we'll just borrow more money, right? But it's really hard to restrict spending once the economy gets going again. So I just had you look it up before the lecture started. What is our national debt at now?
$24 trillion.
Yeah, right around $24 trillion. So
over 24 trillion.
Yeah, over 24 trillion. So we'll talk about that later. So some people would say, see, it's easy. It's easy to increase spending to get the economy going. It's much harder to restrict it when the economy is booming. Make sense?
Yep.
Yep. Because people tend to get used to the government money, and people's jobs are dependent on the government money, and they don't want it being restricted. Okay, now let's discuss monetary policy.
Monetary policy.
Remember, fiscal policy is different from monetary policy.
If you say so.
Now we'll discuss monetary policy. This is government policy that attempts to manage the economy by controlling the money supply and thus interest rates. And monetary policy is handled by the Federal Reserve. What do you know about the Federal Reserve Board?
It's called the Federal Reserve Board.
It's called the Federal Reserve Board, or sometimes it's just called the Fed. They'll say the Fed rose interest rates or lowered interest rates, right? Recently, all they've been doing is lowering interest rates to get the economy going. Okay, so the Federal Reserve System was created by Congress in 1913 to establish banking practices and regulate currency. Okay, and so it's basically largely through interest rates, but also the money supply. But let's focus on interest rates, that the Fed manipulates the economy. Okay? So to see how, say you want to start a new business.
I want to start a new business.
You want to start a new business. A baking shop.
Yeah!
Yeah, okay. Exactly, right? Okay?
Exactly what I would want.
And so you have to borrow $100,000 to buy a cute little baking shop, right?
And all my stand mixers and my industrial ovens and my piping kits.
Okay.
And all that jazz.
All that good stuff, right? And say interest rates are low, 1%.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now let's not worry about totally paying off the loan. Let's just say you borrowed $100,000.
Okay.
And you owe 1% in interest each year, right? So how much would you owe in interest each year.
$1,000.
$1,000 outstanding at.
Yeah, I can do math.
You can do math, exactly, right? And so when you're deciding whether or not to start your business, if interest rates are low, you say, well, geez, all I'm going to owe is $1,000 a year. I ought to be able to clear that no problem and make enough money to, pay my employees and earn decent profit. Mm-hmm. Sounds good. Let's do it, right? Let's do it. Yeah. Big income. Here we go. Right? Okay. And that stimulates the economy. Low interest rates. Now say interest rates are high.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I know. Say, just for the sake of example, say they're 8%. Okay? Now how much are you going to owe each year on that $100,000 loan?
$8,000.
$8,000.
That's a lot more.
That's a lot of cupcakes.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of macaroons.
That's a lot of macaroons.
That's a lot. That's a lot of Dunkin'
Exactly. And so you don't take that risk, right? Because the interest rates are higher. And so that means you're not renting the building space. You're not buying. Go through all the things you'd buy to get big and start.
Stand mixers, industrial ovens, piping kits. I would need cash registers. I would also need. I would need an industrial glass chiller so that everything could set properly. I would have to buy just a lot of stuff.
Okay, all right. So when interest rates are high, you're not starting that baking company. You're not buying any of that stuff.
No,
right?
Can't buy anything.
Right. When they're low, you are taking that risk and you're buying all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, do low interest rates stimulate the economy or restrain the economy?
Stimulate.
That's right. Low interest rates stimulate the economy. Absolutely.
Write that down, folks.
Right. Write that down. So, here recently, the coronavirus changed everything. Now everything's just chaos, right?
Yes, we're in a post-apocalyptic situation.
I know.
It's not even interesting. At least they could have done with the zombie apocalypse, but no.
But let's go back to before the coronavirus, and there was some sense of normalcy. It looked like the economy was starting to do pretty well, right? Well, it did before the coronavirus.
Yeah.
Like I said, before the coronavirus. Unemployment was low.
Yeah.
The economy was doing well. Mm-hmm. In that situation, what would the Fed do? Increase interest rates or lower them?
Probably increase.
Increase, exactly, right? Because the economy, it looked like it was doing really well. See, here's the thing. When the economy starts doing really well, like it was, what happens to the unemployment rate?
It drops.
It drops, right? If the unemployment rate gets too low, and I know that's too low. Well, what's wrong with the unemployment rate? But in general, the lower the unemployment rate gets, then what happens to the demand for labor?
It goes down.
No,
it goes up.
It goes up, right? So as the unemployment rate goes down, you're competing for fewer and fewer people, right?
So you better pay me more, or else I'm going to Walmart instead of Target.
There you go, right? So as the unemployment rate goes down, what's going to happen to wages?
They're going to go up.
They're going to go up. And as wages go up, what's going to happen to inflation overall?
It also goes up.
It also goes up, right.
Darn inflation. Remember
Darn.
when I could buy bubblegum for a nickel?
Yeah, darn inflation. So anyway, the Fed's been asked to balance these things. Inflation, economic growth, interest rates. It's been asked to balance these things so that in the long run, our people live good lives, but also the economy develops properly.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a tricky position. So back to before the coronavirus, when the Fed was raising interest rates. I think Trump was happy or upset about that?
Upset.
Upset, exactly.
He's
Why?
a businessman.
So what does he want? High or low interest rates?
He wants low.
Yeah, exactly. Because that promotes economic growth.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So he was getting on the Fed for that.
He gets on to everyone for
Yeah, I know. Which is interesting because usually the Fed, in class we talked earlier about how the Fed is intended to be an independent regulatory agency, right? It's not supposed to. Once the head of the Fed is appointed, the head of the Fed can't be fired by Donald Trump.
The head of the Fed can't be fired?
The head of the Fed.
Head of the Fed.
They can't be fired, right? Because they're supposed to act independently.
That makes a lot of sense.
It does make a lot of sense, right? So I think I told this in class, but I'll tell it again. Before the 92 election, the first President Bush was running for re-election. We'd just come out of the Kuwait War. The first Iraq War, where we kicked Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. And it was seen as being very successful, and everyone thought there's no way George W. Bush could lose. But then the Fed started doing some things that weren't necessarily the greatest for the short-term interest of the economy, but would benefit the economy in the long run. Mm-hmm. And so a number of scholars think that maybe cost him the election, right? Yeah, cost him the election in 92. But then how did the economy do in the mid-90s?
It was doing good.
It was booming. It was booming in the mid-90s. So the argument could be made, our government worked exactly like it was supposed to, right? Presidents come and go, but the head of the Fed is there making sure the economy chugs along. Now let's talk about unemployment for a minute.
I'm unemployed.
Well, are you?
Well,
let's look at the official definition. The official definition, is the number of Americans who are out of work but actively looking for a job.
Oh, I'm not actively looking.
No,
I have
you don't
one.
count. And also, you're too young.
What?
The number does not usually include those who are not looking. Right? And so that's why it's kind of a tricky number. So, say the economy is so bad, you've just given up looking for a job.
Right.
And I'm like, forget it. I'm through looking for work. My wife can maybe pick up a few extra shifts, but I'm done. Would I be counted as unemployed anymore?
Not really, no.
No, not officially, right? And so that's always been a concern with the official definition of unemployment, right? Is it doesn't count those who are not looking.
It's like any stay-at-home parent.
Right. So, like your mom.
Yeah,
right?
Nancy.
I work full-time. My wife just picks up hours as a physical therapist when it's reasonable, when I can be home with the kids, and it works out well with our schedules, and we don't have soccer that day, right? See, she's not looking for a full-time job right now, right?
No.
So she wouldn't be counted as unemployed. And if she didn't want to pick up any shifts, and she hadn't worked for the last year, she wouldn't be counted as unemployed.
Oh.
Yeah. Make sense?
Makes.
Now, see, some people say the workforce participation rate is also worthwhile to look at, and it tells you something. The workforce participation rate. So say the unemployment rate is really low, right? Hey, the unemployment rate's only 3%, historic low, right? But your workforce participation rate isn't very high. Like, you look at all the adults out there and say only like 50% are working.
Not good.
Okay, why might someone be not working?
They don't have to.
Yeah, one, they don't have to. My spouse earns enough, and I don't want to work, right? And so maybe in ways a low workforce participation rate, maybe in ways it's good. If the reason you're not working is your spouse earns plenty of money and you don't have to work and you don't want to work, well, yeah. But
I can just travel.
Well, okay. but yeah. Also, see, sometimes people say, oh, hey, we have like a 97% workforce participation rate. Well, super. That means like both the husband and wife in almost every household has to work in order to make ends meet, maybe.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe it's not. I don't know.
Maybe they're working multiple jobs.
Maybe they're working multiple jobs. Do you know that when George W. Bush was running for president, this is second Bush, George W. Bush. Yeah. He was at some kind of town hall meeting or something like that. I forget the exact setting. But some woman said, I have to work like 2-3 jobs. I forget what it was, but she's like, I have this full-time job, and I have to go to here just to make ends meet, and, I'm stretched so thin, I'm barely surviving. I've got to work 2-3 jobs. And guess how Bush responded to it?
I don't know.
He's all, isn't that wonderful that we live in a country where there's job opportunities available for people?
Oh boy.
I know, it's one of those situations where you're just like, this bad answer, George. Isn't that great? You can work 5-6 jobs. What? So yeah, isn't that great? Okay, so you get the official unemployment rate?
Yes.
Okay. You're out of work, but you got to be actively looking for work in order to be counted as unemployed. Okay, now, that takes us to the idea of a tariff. This is a tax levied on imports to help protect a nation's industries, labor, or farmers from foreign competition. It can also be used to raise additional revenue. Okay? Now let's just say the Japanese are producing what's Toyota's Camry? That's what it is. Camrys, they're like mid-size family sedan. Yeah, the Camry, really top seller. Say they're producing it for, $15,000 a year. Mm-hmm. It costs $15,000 to make it. To make it.
Not to sell it and make profit from it.
Right. Just to make it. That's material and labor and everything else that goes into it. And imagine that the cheapest we can produce a Chevy Malibu for, right? Which is a comparable car, is $17,000. Yeah. Well, if you're the federal government and you want to protect the automobile industry, then how much of a tariff do you slap on that Camry?
About $2,000.
Yeah, about $2,000 bucks.
Right.
Yeah, sounds about right. That way, when someone's in the showroom, and they're all Toyota Camry, 17,000. Now that we slapped the $2,000 tariff on it, Chevy Malibu, 17,000. Well, which do you like more, honey?
I like the sound of the Malibu.
Yeah, the Malibu.
It reminds me of the sun.
Yeah, exactly. So there it is. So we slap a $2,000 tariff on the Camry as it's coming in. Now, have we as a society now increased our tax revenues?
Yes.
Yes, we have, right? And some people make the argument there's nothing better than a tax on foreigners, right?
Really?
Well, I'm just saying, right? The money's coming in, right? Others, free market types would... Do you think free market types support or oppose tariffs? Oppose, right? Because they see it as government involvement in the economy. They would say if Chevy can't produce a car as efficiently as the Japanese, then Chevy should go out of business, right?
Well, but then as soon as Chevy goes out of business, Toyota's just going to mark up their prices.
Yeah, that's one of the concerns, right? Also, our automobile manufacturing jobs, are they good, solid, middle-class jobs for U.S. citizens?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, they are. Remember, not everybody necessarily wants to get a college education. Can. Yeah, or will be successful at getting a college education, right?
Yeah.
So it provides good middle-class jobs where you're adding a lot of value to a product. Also, from a national security standpoint, why would we want an automobile industry to thrive in the United States?
So we can have transportation.
Yeah, well, so we can have transportation. And keep in mind, during World War II, if you have something that's designed to produce automobiles, can you shift it to producing Jeeps?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you shift it to producing
bombers?
Exactly, right? And so...
Them ones that fly in the air.
Yep, exactly.
Can you make the Hyundai plant do that?
Exactly. And so some people will say, just from a national security standpoint, you better protect steel, right? You better protect other metals like aluminum.
Yeah.
You better protect your automobile industry. You ought to protect your airline, manufacturing airlines like Boeing, right? You protect those things because it's more than just out of economic concern. We need those out of national security concerns.
Makes sense.
Makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. Also, keep in mind things like agriculture with tariffs. When are you more vulnerable? When your own food needs are met as a country, or when you need to import
When
food?
you need to import.
You're very vulnerable in that situation. Absolutely, right?
We get all of our bananas from Guatemala.
Well, but we can live without bananas, right?
What?
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Is you look, what do we have a lot of? We got, in the U.S.,
corn.
A lot of grains, corn, absolutely.
There's so much corn.
California produces a ton of fruits and vegetables and nuts. I think the Central Valley of California produces like a crazy percentage of our nation's fruits, vegetables, and nuts. It's high. It's high. The point is, and that's why this is my daughter, that
Hi.
we mentioned here. But that's why, my parents live in Thousand Oaks. It's really close to the coast. You go over the hill, and there's Camarillo and other communities. And as you go over the hill and you drive toward the beach, what's in between you and the beach?
Mountains.
Well, after the mountains where it's flat.
Trees.
There's the strawberry fields. Exactly. And the strawberry fields and the spinach fields and the berries.
Oh!
Yeah.
All of that?
All of that.
Oh, all the white covered stuff? I was thinking of going to Point Doom. You're saying of going
Oh, no. I'm saying when you go out to Ventura.
When you go to Ventura.
When you go to Ventura.
Well, then that's different.
Okay, that is different. That's true. Yeah, on the drive to Point Doom in Malibu,
yeah,
it's very different. Although you do see the wineries.
Yeah.
But when you go north, you see, you go from like $1 million homes,
yeah,
and all of a sudden, strawberry fields and
nice.
and raspberry fields and that type of thing. Well, it is nice, but what do you think would be more profitable? Selling that to developers and putting homes there?
Oh yeah.
Or,
do you know how many $1 million homes you could put there?
That's right. Or growing strawberries.
Well, I think strawberries are important.
Well, I know you do, but the point is, the thing is, they've got to be subsidized, right? Otherwise, it makes economic sense for people just probably to sell those in most situations. I'm not saying every situation, but if you're wondering how you go from $1 million homes to strawberry fields, that's a lot of strawberries you better be getting in order to make them economically worthwhile. So, okay. So, let's talk about what Trump did here recently. Did he slap tariffs on products coming from China?
Yes.
Yes, he did, right? And there are a few reasons why. Number one, China for a while had not been following international agreements on intellectual property and things like that. But also, because they have more of a state-run economy, the argument was the government was subsidizing things like steel production. Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah. And as a result, they were able to sell it more cheaply than other private manufacturers, like here in the United States, right? And so the term is used, they were dumping cheap steel on the international market. Yeah. And if they do that, if a U.S. steelmaker can produce a certain amount of steel for $100, and the Chinese are dumping the same amount of steel on the market for $80, what's going to happen to the U.S. steelmaker?
They're not going to be able to sell it.
They're not going to be able to sell it. They're going to go out of business, right? So Trump slapped tariffs on the Chinese and said, they've been inappropriately subsidizing things like steel. They haven't been abiding by international trade agreements when it comes to intellectual property and that type of thing. And I actually, I'm personally in agreement with Trump on those things. Like, someone had to stand up to the Chinese and make them play by the rules. The other thing that's kind of frustrating, here, two things, Nat, and then we're almost done. Two things with tariffs is sometimes things get tricky. Okay, go back to the Japan example, right? Now, I honestly don't know what type of healthcare they have in Japan.
You don't?
No, I don't. But just say they have like a single payer system or socialized healthcare, just like a lot of Western Europe does, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Consequently, the price of your employees' health care is not worked into the price of the automobile. right? Because the government's already providing citizens with health care. Make sense?
Yeah.
In the U.S., right? Does Chevy have to provide health care for its employees?
Yes, they do.
Yes. What is that going to do to the cost per vehicle?
Gonna bump it up.
Gonna bump it up. Exactly. Right? And so this is one of the tricky things with tariffs is you're like, well, yeah, these countries are producing automobiles cheaper than the U.S. because the employers don't have to pay for healthcare insurance for their employees.
Yeah.
Whereas we do in the U.S., right? The other thing, one more thing, and then we better wrap it up because time you lose your interest here.
Hey.
The other thing is, and I'm going to pick on the Chinese here a little bit again. There are areas of China that get so polluted that people have to wear masks.
All the time.
Yeah.
It's really bad. I brought this up in my science class. They're like, you're just making this stuff up. And I'm like, no, I'm not.
No, you're not. It's so bad they have to wear masks, right? Whereas here in the U.S., we have environmental laws that businesses have to abide by. Yeah. Well, is that going to increase the cost of steel production?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, right?
Personally, I think we should have more, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah. So, anyway, that's another thing to consider with tariffs is, are these countries really enforcing environmental laws, and is the playing field really level? Because actually, I'm gonna say just one more thing. I'm gonna say one more thing. I love the United States of America. I think we are a great country, right? And when other countries say, "Oh, we produce this more cheaply," a lot of the time I ask, "Well, how? How are you doing it? Is there some
loophole?
No, is there some secret method that you've devised? Is there some invention, right? That helps you produce this more efficiently?" And the answer a lot of the time is no. They haven't found a way of doing it necessarily more efficiently because they've found a better process. Usually the price of something is cheaper just because either they're exploiting the environment or they're exploiting labor. Mm-hmm. And so those are kind of the two big things, right? Where we as a world have got to decide if we're going to have genuine free trade, then we need to have environmental laws that are uniformly enforced.
Yes.
And you have to have workplace safety features. How are we going to treat our workforce?
Oh, OSHA laws.
Yeah, that's part of it, but you want them worldwide.
Yeah.
Right? If you get a 15-minute break every 2 hours, then that should happen worldwide. So, anyway, there we are. Take care. Hope you guys have a great day. Bye-bye.